That night, Mike disappeared. He was about a week and a half into his program and had not relapsed once. The following morning he didn't show up for yoga and wasn't answering his phone. My first thoughts were that he'd gone on a bender and we wouldn't see him again. However, I dismissed the idea after I checked his online journal. We have our clients maintain an online journal, which they update once a day. It was updated at 11 the previous night. When a crack addict slips up, they usually do so in the early evening. It either happens all at once, or there's a gradual slip. Typically, it's before they've eaten an evening meal, when their energy is low. They're tired, and they succumb. It often happens more or less the same way. At first, it'll be a drink, perhaps a beer. Next, it'll be a shot of something. And then you can almost see their will wavering. They'll go somewhere and get one hit. Just one. They may not even take much cash with them, but they'll find a way to pay for it. There's always a way. I checked Mike's hotel. He'd gone out a little after midnight. The staff let me into his room. The room was in my name anyway, so no one was worrying about privacy. Room service had not been in yet. The bed was disturbed but not slept in. The first thing I noticed was that he'd drunk about 4 coffees. He'd been saving the sachets. That's a really bad sign. It sounds daft, but for some people coffee can trigger a relapse. I think it just gets the heart going in a certain way. Perhaps that creates a subconscious response. Not everyone agrees with me on this, but I can only say what I have experienced with my own clients, and there's definitely a link. As a result, we often get our clients to switch to decaf. I called Mike's wife but got no answer. She was somewhere in the interior of BC and a good half-day's drive away. She was probably enjoying a well-earned rest from life with an addict. Not hearing anything was probably a blissful relief for her. How do we recognize the fork in the road? That moment in which, if we go one way, the result is inevitably good, and if we go another way, it is inevitably bad. Those are the moments in which we can hit the reset button of our life. Just because we are who we are, because of how we are not absolved of all blame. We have pivotal moments in which free will is given its opportunity. In those moments, everything can change, if we're smart enough or lucky enough to see them. Stepping back and taking an objective view of oneself is not easy for anyone. Do you remember the first time you heard your own voice on a recorder? Chances are you did not even recognize yourself. If we can't even recognize our own voice, imagine how hard it is to recognize something as complex as our entire self. How hard it is to be objective. Just suggesting one step back at pivotal moments. Take a snapshot in one's mind and ask, is this a good idea? Might be the single best piece of advice anyone can ever give. A conversation with one of my former clients who's gone on to become a prominent artist comes to mind. We chatted about her situation after she'd completed treatment successfully. I should have realized there was something wrong. At the time it didn't really strike me that my behavior was remotely unusual, she laughed. I can't believe I'm saying that now. If you look back at what was happening in your life at that time, when do you think that there was a key moment, a pivotal moment, that you could have made a better decision? I asked. She closed her eyes and sighed in embarrassment. I think it was when I got my boyfriend on the phone and told him I was breaking up with him. I was outside an apartment block in North Van, just over the bridge, she replied. What was so unusual about that? Well, at the time, the guy I dumped for him, the one I'd spent that day with getting drunk in Stanley Park, was being forced into a police car, and there I was telling my boyfriend of 3 years that I was leaving him for a guy being taken away to a drunk tank. My artist friend had gone on to massively abuse alcohol in the coming few years. Don't ever think abusing alcohol is any better than abusing a narcotic. It isn't. I can see how you might feel awkward about that, I said sympathetically. I can still see his face against the window of the police cruiser. He was waving and blowing me a kiss as they drove off. Yeah, I can see that at a moment like that you might wonder if you are doing the smart thing. People do the strangest things when they're not themselves. Fortunately, she had a later chance to hit that reset button. Not everyone is so lucky.